Welcome to the Real Estate Espresso Podcast, your morning shot of what's new in the world of real estate investing. I'm your host, Victor Menashe. A few days ago, I reported on the structural failure at the former Pfizer headquarters on 42nd Street in Manhattan. But in the last few days, we've learned another important detail about this particular case. The structural engineer on the project has now publicly stated that the reinforcing steel specified in the construction drawings was never installed on the two columns that ultimately buckled. According to published reports, the design called for reinforcing steel plates to be welded to the existing columns over multiple floors in order to carry the additional load from the massive vertical expansion that was being constructed above. Those reinforcing plates were missing. If that statement ultimately proves to be correct, then this was not a design failure. It was an execution failure. These columns are made of steel. Many of the buildings in that immediate area are designed exactly the same way. The Pan Am building that my mom worked on is designed that way. The Commodore Hotel, now the Grand Hyatt, is the exact same kind of steel structural columns. The cross-section looks a bit like an I-beam, except that it's vertical instead of horizontal. The engineer called for steel plates to be welded to the sides in order to create a box beam out of the I-beam profile. This was not done, and photos of the failed columns clearly show the original columns with no welded plates. Now, I've looked at the detail on the structural drawings, which clearly show for the treatment for 4 different cases of columns, and the columns near the exterior of the building are the ones in question. But I think there's an even larger lesson hiding beneath the surface. Over the past week, I've listened to numerous structural engineers dissecting the incident on YouTube. Most have focused on assigning blame to the contractor or asking where the New York City building inspectors were. And those are reasonable questions, but they're not the whole story. Having been involved in a number of projects over the last number of years, I can tell you there are usually many more eyes on a project than just the contractor and the building department. Any project financed with construction debt involves periodic draw inspections by the lender. The lender is protecting its collateral. Before releasing millions of dollars, somebody confirms the work's been completed to that step in the process. Well, those inspections frequently involve representation from the architect, the engineer, the owner's project management team, the quantity surveyor, and the lender's own consultant. On a project of this scale, adding roughly 19 new stories on top of an existing structure, strengthening of the existing columns is not a minor detail buried in the specs. It is the project. Without strengthening the columns, everything above depends on structural members that were never intended to carry those additional floors. So the obvious question is, how did this get past everyone? Now, I want to be careful. The investigation, of course, is still underway. The Department of Buildings, the Department of Investigation, and an independent forensic engineer are all examining what happened, and no final conclusions have been reached. The city has also expanded inspections to other projects involving the same developer and inspection firm while investigators determine whether broad quality assurance issues exist. But regardless of where the responsibility ultimately lands, this incident exposes something larger. It's a gap in quality assurance. Now, quality assurance isn't glamorous. Nobody celebrates it. Nobody gets awards for finding problems, but every high reliability industry depends on it. Software isn't shipped without testing. Aircraft aren't delivered without every component undergoing an inspection and certification. Automobiles go extensive inspection on the factory floor before they're ever sold. And bridges receive independent reviews. Elevators are load tested. There's just many examples. Philosophy is always the same. You never assume, you verify, and it's a checklist-based type verification. Construction should be no different. In fact, construction arguably requires even greater discipline because every building's unique. They're not mass-produced. Unlike an automobile factory producing thousands of identical vehicles, every major building is unique. That uniqueness makes systematic verification even more important. One of the concepts I frequently discuss on the show is that an organization fails when critical assumptions go unchecked. And someone assumes that the welding was completed, someone assumes the inspection occurred, and someone assumes another consultant verified the work. Someone assumes the contractor followed the drawings. Eventually, those assumptions stack on top of each other until everyone believes somebody else is responsible. And so that's how Swiss cheese failures occur. Every layer has holes. Eventually, all the holes line up. But now let's consider the structural engineer. Some have suggested the engineer might not have been contractually responsible for routine site inspections, and that may be true, I don't know. Engineering contracts differ. Owners frequently limit that scope in order to save money. But professional responsibility doesn't end where the contract ends. If I'm the engineer of record and my professional license is attached to the integrity of a structure carrying thousands of future occupants, I would want to know that the most critical structural modifications were in fact done. if it meant insisting that periodic structural inspections become part of my scope of services. That would be essential, even if the owner had to pay more, because the alternative can become infinitely more expensive. Now, today, the project is stopped. Nearby buildings were evacuated. The structure required emergency shoring and stabilization. The developers, facing enormous delay costs, the newly constructed floors will probably need to be demolished and reconstructed. Insurance claims are inevitable, litigation's almost certain, and the reputation of everyone involved has been affected before the investigation's even complete. Saving a few bucks on quality assurance suddenly doesn't look like a bargain. Now, one additional lesson deserves attention. The City Department of Buildings reportedly began reviewing other projects associated with the same parties. At first glance, that might seem like an overreaction. I actually don't think it is. Quality failures are rarely isolated events. They're usually symptoms of a broken process. If a system allows one critical inspection to be missed, investigators naturally ask whether that same process exists elsewhere. And that's exactly what every airline does after an accident, what every auto manufacturer does after a recall, and what the construction industry should do as well. See, quality assurance isn't about finding someone to blame. It's about designing systems where critical mistakes become almost impossible to make. The strongest quality assurance systems assume people will eventually make mistakes. The purpose is to catch those mistakes before gravity does. For example, even in my own business, when I'm sending an email, if it's an important email, I will have somebody in the team independently review it before it gets sent out. I write reasonably well, but I'm less likely to catch my own mistakes. That's what quality assurance looks like. As you think about that, have an awesome rest of your day. Go make some great things happen. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.